Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So at the beginning of 2024, I had a look at the updated elite car list for GT7. And since then there's been a bunch of inclusions to the game, as well as some cars that weren't on that leaked list. So I thought I'd take a look back at the list today, see what's already come to Gran Turismo 7, and see what seems to be in the pipeline for the game. So to add some context for those that might not know or those that might be new to Gran Turismo 7, when GT7 launched in March of 2022, there was a data mined elite car list. Now this included a bunch of different cars, however in 2024 this list was re-updated to take out the already included vehicles that have come post-launch to GT7, as well as the likes of Lotus removed due to the licensing issues between Lotus and Polyphony. So ever since the original list in 2022 and the updated list in 2024, that data mine list has been very much a legitimate source for GT7 post-launch content. So today I'm going to dive back in and have a look at what's released so far in 2024 and what is still yet to come. Again, we do get cars that are separate to the data mine list. This does happen a lot, so this isn't necessarily absolutely everything that will still come to GT7, but it is a good indicator of other vehicles yet to come. So on screen now you are seeing the updated 2024 elite car list. Now of course some of these have already released in game, so as I go through I will make mention if it's already in game or of course not and may yet come. Now again, not necessarily all of these vehicles may arrive, but it is a good indication that there is a high possibility of that happening. And obviously with a lot of these cars, I'm assuming since the models are genuinely built from the ground up and we don't have the standard / premium car feature anymore, that these models will probably continue into the next version of the Gran Turismo series, which is probably Gran Turismo 8. So it's only good news for building up that day one car list for Gran Turismo's next iteration. So the first car on the list is the Afeela 26. Of course, this has already arrived during 2024. Again, there was a lot of promotional material between Honda and Sony for their Motability program, and the Afeela 26 has already arrived. Moving on to car number 2, this is one that hasn't arrived yet. This is the Caterham 7 Superlight R500 from 2012. So I believe when it comes to Gran Turismo 7 that Caterham's actually a manufacturer that we don't have currently. So this is fantastic to see. The more manufacturers on board with Polyphony and Gran Turismo, the better. And of course the Caterham 7 is an absolute icon, especially in my home country of the United Kingdom. You will see these things thrown around tracks across the country like no tomorrow. They're incredible to see. They're absolutely beautiful track day toys. So I really hope this one ends up actually arriving. The next car on the list is one that has once again already arrived in game. That is the Chevelle SS 454 LS6 from 1970. This was an absolutely incredible addition to the game. Next up is a car that hasn't arrived yet. We've got a few of them in a row now. That is the Lancia Delta HF Integrale WRC from 1992. If you grew up playing racing games in the late 90s and early 2000s, you will know how iconic the Lancia Delta is, both in games and the real world of motorsport. Of course, this WRC legend isn't alone though, as there is actually 3 Lancia rally cars on this elite car list. So if the Delta's exciting, so is this one. This is the Delta S4 rally car from 1986. Now, if my memory is correct on this one, of course, it's from the Group B era of rally cars. Some of the most bonkers cars to ever exist came from that era. However, this one is supercharged and turbocharged, if I remember rightly. Absolutely incredible. Moving on next then is once again a car that we haven't seen yet. This is the DMC 12 Stage 1 from 1981. Of course, one of the world's most iconic cars, thanks to the likes of Back to the Future. We do already have one in game, which I think is from like 2004, if I believe correctly. However, this does seem to be one of the originals. Now, in terms of the list, we have a few that are already in game. Up first, the Lamborghini Gallardo LP560-4 from 2008. Next up is the Genesis Group 1 R Vision Gran Turismo 2024. Of course, this already came in game as the latest Group 1 addition to GT7. Moving on next, if you're a fan of GTRs, and there's plenty of them in Gran Turismo 7, the GTR 2007 is also on this list. Pretty much the only version of the Nissan R35 GTR that we don't have in game is the original 2007 model. Of course, we do have the facelifted model and of course the most recent version with the T-Spec. Up next, we have the Impreza Sedan WRX STI from 2010. Now, we've got a bunch of Evos this year for post-launch support, so it would make sense that we get some more of its main rival, of course, the Impreza, this being the updated 2010 model of the WRX STI in its sedan form and not the hatchback form. Now, of course, we do then go into the Evo territory. Both of these have come to the game, both the Evo 8 and Evo 9. Then we move on to something quite unique, the M2 1001 1992. Now, I'm a sucker for obscure cars in racing games, and the M2 1001 seems to be exactly that. There's barely any information on this car, and I couldn't find out too much, but it does seem to be the original generation of Mazda Roadster, just quite heavily modified, as you can see. Now, if you're a Gran Turismo fan, you probably know the meme about having 50 different versions of the Mazda Roadster in game, and well, you're about to see a few more a little later down the list. Let's move on then next to the next car on the list, the Quattro S1 1986. Apologies for the image quality on this one, not quite sure what happened here, but in terms of the Quattro S1, we of course already have the Pikes Peak in game. I couldn't really find too much information on this one, but it does seem to be very, very similar to that, and again, it hasn't released so far. Another one that doesn't really make sense to me is the R18 TDI 2011 WR. Honestly, I'm not really sure with this one. As far as I know, we already have it in game, and I'm not sure if it's just a re-liveried version of the car. I really couldn't wrap my head around what this one is meant to be. A little bit like the Quattro as well, but even more difficult to understand. So next up on the list is a couple of cars that have already come to the game. The first being the R31 Skyline GTS R from 1987, of course releasing earlier in the year, and also the R8 V10 Plus from 2016. Moving on then to the third of the three Lancia rally cars to come on the Datamine list. This is the Rally 037 Evo 2 from 1984. So with three different Lancia rally machines on this list, I would absolutely love a themed pack of all three of them coming at once. This for me is absolutely one of the best looking vehicles to ever exist in the world of motorsport. Up next, we have the RGT 4216. So, of course, this was the roof RGT 4.2 from 2016. This one has already arrived. After that, we have a couple of Roadsters, as I mentioned, with the 1001. There would be two more on the list. This is the Roadster RF VS18 and the Roadster RS07. So definitely not as unique as the M2, but in terms of the first one on the list, the RF, the 2018 model, I do genuinely think this is the best looking version with that hardtop roof on out of all of the Mazda Roadsters, but it does seem a little bit copy-paste. And of course, the next one will basically complete all generations of the Mazda Roadster in game, this being the RSNC 2007 model. So it is nice for the fact that it will kind of round up all of the generations, but it's kind of hard to get excited over that, honestly. The next one is the RX-7R from 1991, of course, another car from Mazda. Another car that's known for having kind of multiple generations and multiple different variants in Gran Turismo is, of course, the RX-7. Now, from what I can gather, this will be one of the early models of this generation of RX-7, of course, from 1991. There's definitely a certain charm to it. So let's move on with the list. Now, the next car on this list is the S15 Silvia Spec R Aero 02 Racing Modification. This one, once again, I'm not really understanding, as I'm pretty sure we've got the touring car in game, and I can't necessarily see this being any different if it's the racing racing modified version that is pulled from some of the HD era GT games. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not really understanding this one either. It just seems like a copy paste of the Group 4 car. I'm essentially assuming they're the exact same thing. I don't remember them being that different in the older games, so I'm not really sure where that one's going. Up next is a bunch of cars that we've already have. So we've got the Skoda VGT 23. Of course, this was kind of embarrassingly hyped up by Polyphony, and it's terrible. More to come on that later in the year. Then we have the TTS Coupe from 2009. Of course, this came alongside one of the updates as well. Then we move into obscure car territory, one that you probably won't expect. This is the Type 37A28. Yes, 1928. Of course, this is a Bugatti. Now, honestly, again, I absolutely love obscure cars, and I think this is one that you just wouldn't necessarily expect. However, my hopes is that this does actually come to fruition, ends up in game, and then we can get some series revolving around some of these historic cars we already have as well alongside the Bugatti, making use of some of these garage queens. Hopefully this car changes that around. Okay, next on the list is the V40 T5R design from 2013. Of course, this was Volvo's introduction to Gran Turismo 7 alongside the 240 SE. Both of those have come into the game, and of course the 240 isn't on this list, but did come alongside it. Next up is the Aston Martin Vantage from 2018. So of course we already have the likes of the Vulcan and the Valkyrie in game from Aston Martin, but when it comes to their road car lineup, it's very, very minimal and very, very dated. So this would go miles just to put in some more up-to-date Aston Martins in game. So let's move on next then. This is the 2002 1975. There's actually two versions of this car on this data mined list. So don't shoot the messenger, but I am not the most clued up on the BMW 2002s. It does seem that the first one on the list is probably the most basic of the two. I mean, of course, it's not necessarily basic, but it does seem like it is the lesser model of the two. And of course, we have the more popular 2002 Turbo. This one features in a bunch of racing games, but this is definitely a car that I would love to see. I think it's fantastic looking, even if I don't really know that much about them. So coming to the final few cars on the list, the 430 Scuderia 2007. Of course, this one did arrive in an update not too long ago. Of course, update 1.49 with the physics changes. One that I'm definitely excited for here is the 500E from 1991. I am a sucker for big German boxy cars, and this ticks all the boxes. Now, honestly, I grew up around these sort of late 80s, early 90s Mercedes-Benz. My dad was obsessed with them growing up, so I, was always around them, and he owned a bunch of them. And one that really stood out to me was this kind of like limo type Mercedes, and it was kind of this goldy color. It was absolutely awesome to see. It was incredibly luxurious. However, I've never been able to actually figure out the actual model of it, and it was so many years ago that there's no photos of it around, unfortunately, but that was absolutely awesome to see. Unfortunately, I can't ask him these days, but again, growing up around these things, I'm a massive sucker for these big box-shaped Mercedes. And then to finish off the list, we have two cars that haven't arrived yet. That is the 812 Superfast from 2019 and the 911 Turbo S from 93. So the 812 Superfast is a car that I'm surprised isn't already in game. It's kind of a staple of modern Ferraris, so to not have it in Gran Turismo 7 is just absolutely beyond me. I don't understand why Polyphony's not kind of, got this one in game yet, considering they worked years to get that Ferrari license. And of course, to finish off is the 1993 Porsche 911 Turbo S. Of course, to a lot of people, this is just another, 911 in game, but I absolutely think this is a must. It's a stunning generation. I think it looks absolutely incredible. So for me, it would be fantastic to see this in game. And there we go. That completes the elite car list for Gran Turismo 7. Altogether, there is a bunch of cars still yet to come that haven't released so far in 2024. But as you can see from the list itself, that was of course at the start of the year and updated, there is a lot of credibility to this. And whilst I don't necessarily think every single one of these cars will come to Gran Turismo 7, I think there's still a high chance that there's a bunch more post-launch content yet to come. Anyway, let me know what you think and which ones you're excited for. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.